If a group is truly superior, why do they require laws, chains, and violence just to survive the mere presence of an equal? In their book, The Root Within, researchers Gregory D. Hayes and Kenneth Johnson examine the psychological drivers of prejudice. They frame these exclusionary behaviors as a clinical confession of deep-seated insecurity. Publicly, this behavior is branded as conviction or dominance. The forensic reality within the mind suggests a different state, one of acute panic. This creates a political ideology built on a specific terror, the fear of becoming irrelevant. This is a measurable psychological phenomenon. The prejudiced mind is animated by distinct domains of fear rather than a simple preference for one's own group. This chart breaks down the specific insecurity domains fueling racism. According to the data, the fear of inferiority accounts for over 75% of the underlying psychological motivation, significantly outweighing the fears of displacement, visibility, or equality. The oppressor is psychologically dependent. Because they lack a sturdy internal identity, they require an enemy to define themselves against. Without a marginalized group to press down upon, the perpetrator is left to confront an internal identity that has no other foundation. Historical accounts of colonizers and enslavers often focus on the physical chains. Psychologically, these systems function to mask a recurring panic of being outmatched on a level playing field. The architectural barriers of the 20th century, like segregated staircases, served as a barrier for fragile egos, precluding the risk of equal competition. This line graph traces the intensity of these systems, mapping insecurity from slavery through Jim Crow into the modern era. While the line slopes downward, it reveals an evolution. Overt physical systems of the past have transitioned into subtle psychological systems of the present. These records show that historical oppression functioned as a massive, systemic defense mechanism designed to compensate for perceived weakness. In the modern day, the exact same psychological mechanism simply adopts new disguises. This flowchart illustrates how that mechanism scales. It starts with deep personal insecurity, which triggers a projection onto others. This eventually institutionalizes into systemic power, resulting in social decay. The loud hostility of an anonymous troll serves a specific purpose. It provides a temporary sense of relevance to someone who otherwise feels invisible. In a professional setting, a manager subtly sabotaging a minority colleague is often experiencing a panic reflex. They fear that equality will reveal their own mediocrity, so they attempt to maintain their status by limiting others. This dynamic creates a closed loop. As seen in this circular diagram, fear leads to projection, which drives discrimination. Following the arrows, that discrimination leads to social division, which loops back to reinforce the original fear. Modern prejudice reveals a great deal about the perpetrator's internal state, functioning as a visible record of their own perceived inadequacy. No one is born with these biases. Insecurity of this magnitude is a learned behavior, transmitted through families. It happens quietly. At the dinner table, a father teaches his son to fear those who look different. He calls it heritage, but in reality, he is passing his own psychological fragility to the next generation. That taught insecurity soon infects our institutions. When a teacher lowers expectations for a marginalized student, they often mask their own doubts behind a veil of authority, calcifying fear into the classroom. The ultimate tragedy is the inheritance of this cycle. Children are taught from birth that their own survival relies on the subjugation of someone else. Despite all the stolen power, the violence, and the exclusion, the oppressor's inner void is never filled. This pie chart outlines the amplification cycle. The perpetrator's psychological energy is trapped and divided equally between projection, systemic reinforcement, and internalized distortion. Focusing on the internalized distortion quadrant, the reality becomes clear. No amount of outward dominance changes the inside. The person harboring the hate remains just as fragile as they were at the beginning. It raises a final question: whether these systems persist because facing a lack of internal identity is more difficult than inventing an enemy. If you resonated with this psychological reflection, subscribe for the next chapter of the journey.